Welcome back to your daily dose of ancient wisdom. Today we continue the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, Book 1, Discourse 15. Stricken with the grief at the separation from Sri Krishna, the Pandavas install Pariksit on the throne of Hastinapura and ascend to heavens. Sutta continued. Sri Krishna's friend Arjuna, also nicknamed as Krishna, who had grown lean and thin on account of his separation from Sri Krishna, was stormed with a number of questions by his elder brother, King Yudhishthira, since his gloomy appearance gave rise to many a doubt. His lotus-like face and heart were withering with grief and his brightness gone, and wholly engrossed in the thought of that very Lord, he could not make any answer. Overwhelmed with anxiety caused by love that had swelled due to the disappearance of the Lord, and recalling the friendliness, the beneficence, and goodwill shown by him while playing the role of a charioteer and so on, he managed with difficulty to restrain his tears within his eyes and wiped with his hands those that trickled down his cheeks, and in a voice choked with tears, he addressed his elder brother, King Yudhishthira, as follows. Arjuna said, I have been deceived, O great king, by Sri Hari, Sri Krishna, who appeared in the form of a friend and a relation to me, and who has now robbed me of my mighty valor, which was once the wonder even to gods. At a moment's separation from him, the world presents a loathsome sight, even as this body is called dead when bereft of life. Through his might I was able, on occasion of self-election of a husband by Draupadi, to outshine the princes that had assembled at the house of King Drupada, intoxicated with love, to hit the revolving fish hanging from the roof as a target, after duly fitting the bow with an arrow, and in this way to win the hand of Krishna or Draupadi. In his presence I speedily conquered Indra and his heavenly host, offered the Pandava forest of the god of fire, and secured the council chambers built by the demon Maya, which was of wonderful workmanship and full of conjuring devices, and tributary sheaves brought presents from every quarter during your Rajasuya sacrifice. It was by his might that they revered Bhimasena, your younger brother, possessing as he does the strength and the vigor of 10,000 elephants, succeeded in slaying Jarasandha, who was haughty enough to set his foot on the heads of the vanquished kings in order to accomplish the Rajasuya sacrifice. Footnote: he alone can perform a Rajasuya sacrifice, who has reduced to submission all living monarchs at his time. Nay, it was he who set free a number of princes that had been made captive and brought by Jarasandha to his capital for being sacrificed to the god Mahabhairava, the chief of Pradhamas or attendants of Lord Shiva, and who in return brought presents for your sacrifice. When your wife Draupadi fell at his feet with tears rolling down her cheeks and losing her lovely braid, which thou rendered most sacred and praiseworthy by being sprinkled with holy water during the Rajasuya sacrifice, had been roughly handled by the miscreant like Dusyasana and others in open court. He requited the wrong done to her by widowing their own wives and thereby compelling the latter to lose their hair. Footnote: Hindu widows keep their hair unbraided and unkempt, and even shave them off as a sign of lifelong mourning for their husbands. Nay, It was he who saved us all from a terrible pitfall contrived by our enemy Duryodhana through the sage Durvasa, who took his meals ahead in the company of not less than 10,000 pupils wherever he went by going to the forest and accepting a stray remnant of some vegetable stuff left in Draupadi's kettle. By his doing so, the whole host of students that had accompanied Durvasa while yet immersed in water for ablutions and prayers felt as if all the three words had been certified. Footnote. On a certain occasion, Prince Duryodhana showed great hospitality to sage Durvasa. Pleased with him, the sage desired him to ask a boon. Finding it a splendid opportunity to bring reunion of his cousins, the Pandavas, by inviting the sage to curse on them, he persuaded him to seek the hospitality of Yudhishthira, the principal member of his race, with his 10,000 alumni. But he advised the sage to call on the Pandavas living in the forest at a time when their consort Draupadi had finished her meal after feeding all other people of their camp, so that the virtuous lady might not have to starve. Draupadi had in her possession a miraculous kettle bestowed on her by the sun god, the contents of which would not be exhausted till she has partaken on them. Durvasa, as advised by Duryodhana, called on Pandavas with his 10,000 pupils in the afternoon after Draupadi had taken her meal and after meeting Yudhishthira and asking him to get food ready for him and his pupils, he proceeded with them to the river bank for ablutions and prayers. Much concerned over this, Draupadi, in her deep agony, invoked the succor of Sri Krishna, the friend of the deserted, who immediately responded to her prayer and called at her door. No sooner had he stepped into her cottage than he asked her to get him something to eat, as he was feeling awfully hungry. Draupadi felt overwhelmed with gratitude at Lord's unique grace in asking her for food, even though he sustained not, however, to be easily put off. He insisted on seeing the kettle himself. Draupadi could no longer resist his impropriety and brought the kettle before him. When lo, he found a fragment of the vegetable food cooked in it sticking somewhere in the neck of the kettle. The Lord, who is soul of the universe, satisfied his hunger with that fragment, thereby satisfying the whole universe, and asked Bhimasena to call the sage and his host of people for dinner. The sage and his pupil, however, had already disappeared, since they felt no appetite and feared lest they should incur the displeasure of Pandavas, who, like the Ambarisha, were great devotees of the Lord, for declining their hospitality. Again, it was by his might that I astonished with my valor in a single combat Lord Shankara, who holds a trident in his hand, no less than his spouse, goddess Girija, the daughter of Himalayas, the king of mountains, the former of whom was pleased to impart to me the secret of using his own missile called Pasupatasra, as also did the guardian of every other quarter, nay, ascending to heaven in this very body, I shared with the mighty Indra the exalted throne in his court. While I was enjoying a holiday in the same celestial abode, Indra and other gods sought the help of my powerful arms, which bore the celebrated Gandiva bow and owned their strength to him, for the destruction of their enemies, the Nivata Kavachas and other demons who often molested them. O Yudhishthira, a descendant of Ajamidha, alas, by that supreme person I stand cheated today. Befriended by him, I was able to cross on a chariot all alone the boundless and unfathomable ocean of Kaurava host, which was rendered further impassable by formidable aquatic creatures in the shape of Bhishma, Drona, and others. Again, it was with his help that I not only recovered from the hands of our enemies, the Kauravas, the abundant wealth in the shape of cattle of King Virata, but was also able to snatch from their heads their glorious turbans as well as the precious stones from their diadems. Keeping in front of me as a charioteer, as I stood face to face with the armies successively led by Bhishma, Drona, and other preceptors, Karna and Salya, and adorned with the chariots of a host of Kshatriya chiefs, my lord, he stole away by his very look the lifespan, the hearts, as well as the strength and vigor of great Kar warriors who commanded the various troops. Securely placed as I was in his arms, the missiles of unfailing power hurled at me by the preceptor Drona, Bhishma, Karna, Bhurisrava, the grandson of Bahilaka, and Bahilaka, the younger brother of Shantanu, and others did not even touch my person any more than the weapons of the demons in the service of King Hiranyakashipu, Prahlada's father, did Prahlada, a devotee of Lord Vishnu. Stupid as I was, I chose for my charioteer the Lord whose lotus feet were adorned by noble souls for exemption from birth and death, and who surrenders to his devotees with very self, nay, dazzled by his glory. Great Kar warriors who were arrayed against me could not strike at me even though I stood on the ground, my horses being exhausted. The jokes of Lord Madhava, Sri Krishna, brightened with his hearty and charming smiles and his captivating manner of addressing me as son of Pritha or Kunti, Arjuna, beloved companion and delight of Kurus, stir my heart on to its very depth. O ruler of men, even as I call them to mind, since we treated each other on an equal footing while in bed or sitting together, while rambling on or indulging in self-praise, or even at dinner and so on, I occasionally twitted him and said, "Friend, you are indeed a veracious man, yet in his unlimited greatness that exalted soul put up with my faults, fool as I was, even as a friend would bear with his friend or a father with his own son. Bereft of that supreme person who was my beloved companion and friend, O Suzerain Lord, I am left without a heart. That is why, while escorting the Lord's spouses on the way, dear brother, I was vanquished like a woman by the wicked cowards. The same indeed is my Gandiva bow, and the same my shafts, the same my chariot, and drawn by the same horses. Nay, I am the same Kar warrior before whom monarchs bowed their heads. Bereft of the Lord, however, all these were reduced to nothingness in a moment, like an oblation poured into ashes, services done with some covert motive, and seed sown in a barren land. O King, as regards to our relations at Dwaraka, the city of Yadavas, about whom you have made enquiries just now, they all lost their reason under the influence of a curse pronounced by the Brahmanas, and drank wine, and their mind having been thrown completely off the balance through revelry, they struck one another with their fists like strangers and perished with the exception of only 4 or 5. In fact, it is a diversion of Almighty Lord that living beings now kill one another and now foster one another. Even as in water of the deep, O King, the larger among the aquatic creatures devour the smaller ones, the stronger consume the weaker, and the larger and the stronger ones eat up one another. Even so, the Lord caused the other powerful princes to be exterminated by the mighty and most powerful Yadus, and had the Yadus killed by the Yadus themselves, since they had not now grown to be a burden onto the earth. The words of Lord Govinda Sri Krishna, appropriate as they were to the place and the occasion of the talk, and pertinent to the subject in hand, and soothe the agony of heart, ravish my soul even as I call them to mind. Sutta said, as Jishnu, Arjuna, was thus contemplating on Sri Krishna's lotus feet with most intense devotion, his mind became tranquil and free from passion. All the impurities of his mind, in the shape of lust, anger, and so on, having been wiped out by the devotion that had grown in intensity through the contemplation of the feet of Lord Vasudeva, he now recollected the gospel which, though preached by the Lord in the battlefield, had been forgotten through mental obscurity occasioned by lapse of time and intense worldly activity. The veil of Maya, the nescience, having been withdrawn from him through the realization of the Brahma, Arjuna transcended the 3 gunas or modes of Prakriti. His illusion in the shape of the sense of duality was fully resolved. His astral body was dissolved as he was finally rid of sorrow and secured immunity from transmigration. Hearing of the Lord's departure for his divine abode and the extermination of the race of Yadu, Yudhishthira, whose mind was now completely set at rest, resolved to ascend to heaven. When Pritha, the mother of Pandavas, heard from Yudhishthira of the destruction of the Yadus and the Lord's mysterious departure as told by Arjuna, she fixed her mind with exclusive devotion on Lord Adhokshaja or Sri Krishna and turned her back on the world consisting of birth and death. Lord Sri Krishna, who is ever free from birth and death, cast off in the eyes of the world the very body with which he had relieved the earth's burden, just as a man throws away the thorn with which he has extracted another. For both were equal in the eye of the Lord. Even as the Lord, like an actor, assumes and then drops the form of a fish, so did he shuffle off the body with which he had removed the earth's burden. When Lord Sri Krishna, the bestower of liberation, bodily departed from this earth, leaving behind his stories which are charming to the ear, that very day entered the Kali age, which leads man to unawakened consciousness, to unrighteousness. The wise king Yudhishthira saw the growth of vices like greed, falsehood, deceit, and violence, not only in the city of Hastinapura, but in the whole of his state, nay, in every home, as well as in the minds of people. And concluding therefore the advance of Kali age, prepared to depart from this world. At Hastinapura, the emperor installed his grandson Pariksit, who was not only well disciplined, but was his own compeer in virtues and the sovereign of the ocean-grilled earth. While at Mathura, he enthroned Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, and the only surviving member of Sri Krishna family, as the lord of Surasenas. Then, having offered a sacrifice to Prajapati, the divinity presiding over the prosperation, Yudhishthira, who had mastered his self, received the sacred fires into himself, renounced his home, and became a recluse, leaving at the place his fine clothes, bangles, and all he renounced the feeling of I and mine, and completely severed all his worldly ties. He mentally merged his speech into mind, the mind into prana, the vital air, which has its seat in the lungs, the prana into the apana, the life wind which goes downwards and out at the anus, the apana with its function of excretion into Mrityu, the god of death, and merged Mrityu into his body made up of 5 elements. Thus, realizing his body as nothing but death, the royal sage Yudhishthira merged the same into the 3 gunas or modes of Prakriti. These 3 gunas again he merged into one fundamental Prakriti or nature. This Prakriti, which is universal cause, he merged into the Jiva, the individual soul, and the Jiva into the imperishable Brahma, the Absolute. In other words, he began to feel that the whole of this phenomenal universe is the same as Brahma. Clad in rags and abstaining from food and drinks, he took a vow to complete silence, flung about his hair in a disorderly way, and exhibited himself like a dullard or a madman or a fiend. Waiting for none and hearing nothing like a deaf man, he came out of the palace and contemplating in his heart on Supreme Brahma, he took the path towards the north, a path trodden by exalted souls even in the past, and treading with one does not return. Finding the people on earth in the grip of Kali age, the promoter of unrighteousness, all his brothers too followed him with a similar resolve to attain the divine abode. Having duly achieved all the ends of life and knowing the lotus feet of Lord Vaikuntha Sri Krishna as their eternal abode, they clung to them with their mind, their intellect being purified by devotion that has grown in intensity through meditation of those feet. Their mind was excessively fixated on the supreme reality of Bhagavan Narayana or Sri Krishna, which is the abode of only those who are purged of all sin. With that pure mind, they attained that goal which is difficult to attainment for the wicked and sensually minded. Vidura, too, whose mind was fully controlled and possessed by Sri Krishna, cast off his body at Prabhasa near Dwaraka, and with this thought fixed on Sri Krishna, he returned to his abode, the realm of Yama, accompanied by the mains who had called there to take him back. Draupadi also, when she came to know of her lord's indifference to the world, concentrated her mind on the divine Sri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, and attained to him. He who listens with reverence to this most sacred and blessed story of the departure in this manner of Pandu's sons, the beloved of the Lord, develops devotion to Sri Hari, Sri Krishna, and attains perfection of final beatitude. Thus ends the 15th discourse entitled Ascent of Pandavas to Heaven in Book 1 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as Paramahamsa Samhita. Thank you.